Hi, everybody, and welcome to the new episode of the Celts podcast. I hope everyone's keeping well who's listening. This podcast is going to have four people on the panel today. We'll have myself, Stephen, John, my co-host, Anthony, a show regular, and also James Forrest from the Celtic blog. How are you all?
Not bad.
All right, mate, as well as can be expected.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, guys, I've actually went with a title of this podcast that someone said it was during the weekend, and it actually makes a lot of sense. Basically about the Celtic squad. They just can't wait for it to be over. And I think it's quite evident from the game at the weekend against Rangers, or rivals across the city, that that's the case. There was just nothing from the team. And the game finished 4-1 to Rangers, and quite deservedly so. We all have to admit that. I think we were just shite, to be honest, guys. And James, I want to come to yourself first. We've had 2 days or so to reflect back on the events we've seen during the weekend. What's your overriding emotion towards that game?
The same overriding emotions I've had for the whole season. I was glad the game ended, and I can't wait for the season to be finished. It was obvious from the minute McGregor got sent off it was going to be a long, long day, because although we've seen Celtic managers go to Ibrox and go a man down and come back and win the game, that we never had that belief under Lennon. We certainly didn't have it under Kennedy. Kennedy himself said it was the turning point of the game. Although there was plenty of the game left. You know, that just sums up the attitude at the whole club. It's a defeatist mentality right across the board. And I just couldn't wait for the game to be done. And I can't wait for the season to be done. It's ridiculous.
I think that's the emotion of all of us, to be honest, because even if you look at the goals and stuff, I know Celtic scored and things, but that there for me is just a side part of the actual game itself. The game, as you said, James, when Colin McGregor got sent off, you kind of thought to yourself, oh, here we go, this is going to be a long afternoon. As we went there before with Rodgers and stuff and won with 10 men, but there's no game plan with Kennedy. It just seems to be a Lenny 2.0, where it seems like he's on the phone to him, pick this team for me, help me out. And if you look at some of the goals as well, Anthony, I'll come to yourself. Some of the goals, I don't mean to single wee poor young Stephen Welsh out, but that goal at the end was just laughable for me. And it's for me, it kind of shows where Celtic are at the moment, that we're relying on a young guy like Stephen Welsh to come in and plug them gaps when we should have had quality, saying we should have had people in and ready to go. But what was your feeling towards, especially the goals we were conceding? I think it was just, again, there was no improvement in what we've been seeing as fans.
Yeah, I mean the game went very much similar to a lot of games have went this year, Stephen. Just calamity at the back and not being clinical enough in front of goal. It's although it was a higher margin of victory for Rangers on Sunday, in many ways the game sort of went very much the same way as the Scottish Cup, in terms of they did what they needed to do, and but then we had chances to get back in the game, and you know, several clear-cut chances and didn't take them. I would probably say the one I was most, in terms of the goals conceded, the one I was most furious about, I would say, was the second goal, because I mean, it's just, again, not doing the basics properly, failing to defend, failing to stop the cross for a start. I mean, it's getting actually quite sad seeing our captain, who's been magnificent for so many years. You know, he got turned inside out by Morelos, but then for a guy who last week we were saying would potentially be one of the few bright spots in the season, Chris Ayer, ducking out the way, and then I'm sorry, but Scott Bain's got to do better for me as well. It was just, and especially after the fact we've just went a man down, but then got ourselves back in the game. You've got to do the basics better, and like so many other times this season, we've failed to do so.
Yeah, I think I've seen a sort of analysis of Scott Brown over the last couple of, not seasons, but couple of months as well. I think it was by Boys Analytics on Twitter, and I seen them get a lot of flack for it. But I thought it was well pointed out that the fact is his sort of game, his legs and the pace of the game was catching up with Scott Brown, and sentimentality for me has kept him in the team, John. And if you look at the goals as well, like Kemar Roof, he wandered into the box unmarked, bang, header. And the Morelos goal, you're looking at a triple prong there. Scott Brown for me didn't do enough. And then you look at the Christopher Ayers, he's afraid of getting his hair wrecked, so he ducks. And then Scott Bain can't even touch the bar. He's like 5'5" or something. So, I mean, for me, that game in the weekend is, as James said at the start, it's just, you just can't wait for the season to be over.
No, I'm in total agreement with James there. It was just a result to forget, really. Summed up the season pretty much to a T. Like he says, that second booking for McGregor was certainly a turning point, and you knew the odds were against you from that point onwards. But I thought up until that point we seemed all right, and I guess prior to the game, it's like we've always got, well, myself anyway, confident that there's enough about us to be able to get something out of those games. But and we've shown in previous Old Firm games as well that we've controlled the game in large parts, but it's a failure to create and finish chances that's cost us. So went into this game with a wee bit of confidence, I guess, thinking we might do something, but saw again Kennedy never made any changes, any real changes, and his tactical decisions towards the latter end of the second half was abysmal, and it just shows you how tactically inept he is. And it's just, again, it just sums up the season to a T, and I just want to get this out and done with and move on.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you brought the lineup up. I come to yourself, Anthony, for this. What really struck me, what we should know, if you're a manager especially, and you're trying to throw up surprises or tactical, just changes something to throw the other team off the scent of what we're going to do. What do you think Kennedy's thinking of himself the night before a game? He's sitting going, what can I do to shock this Rangers team? Because they have our number the way we play, and they're quite used to that this season anyway. What can I do? And then you wake up the next morning, the Celtic fans, you get a bit of buzzing about the lineup coming out, and then you see the likes of John Joe Kennedy keeping his place, and you go through the team, Edwards starting again, even though he couldn't give two flyers. And I know he scored, but again, that's from Ayer hitting it off him basically on his shoulder. But Anthony, why is it that Kennedy, for me, he doesn't have any balls about him?
I suppose he's just he's trying to steer a big ship through very stormy waters at the minute. That's not me sticking up for him. I kind of, gave a big sigh when I seen the lineup as much as a lot of folk did. I was happy to see James Forrest starting the match, I must admit. And I think, although the way the game went, it didn't allow for him to get as much on the ball as he could. But you could see that having him, as we said in the last podcast, actually, him being in the team just does give that extra bit of balance. If it was up to me, I think I was on last Tuesday and I did say that I would have possibly started but without Eddie, because I thought his effort in the cup game sort of merited being dropped. But I think as much as I was as big a critic of Kenny as any of the rest of the guys on the performance in the cup game, but I just wasn't sure. Can you really throw young Ralston in, who literally has it? I'm not even sure if he's featured this year. So it would have been that he would possibly say for nothing else than match sharpness, he would have played Kenny, but as he's done pretty much since he's came in, he's not really done anything at all. If Kennedy was wanting to use these games since Neil was removed from his position to try and stamp, to try and put his own stamp on the team, to try and merit getting the job permanently. I know I'm trying to say that with a straight face. Then he's not really went about it in any sort of. He's not offered anything different. I definitely agree with you on that, Stephen.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but I think it's 8 games. He's won 3, and one of them was against Falkirk. So he's won 2 games in the Scottish League, so to speak. But coming to yourselves, James, when you seen the lineup, I actually want to hear from your point of view here. Would you have went with what Kennedy did, or would you have went a wee bit bolder? What would you have changed if you had the chance?
Well, this is a subject. This is one of the subjects that I don't like talking about, and I don't like thinking about. But one of the things that's characterised this entire season has been the utter selfishness of people at Celtic Park, and I think the lineup was another example of selfishness. Kennedy is more interested, it seems to me, in his own reputation surviving this than he is about doing right by the club. And Lennon was the same. Lennon would play the same players every single week because they were the veterans and all that, and he didn't want to take a chance and playing some of the younger guys and losing. And he lost anyway most weeks when it mattered. And Kennedy's the same. Kennedy had a chance to bed in the players who we're going to need next season. And he's chosen again to go with the same old. He's chosen to go with the players that are safe, the players that he knows, the players that have done it before. They've just not done it this season. And I understand that the guy has his own career to think about when he leaves Celtic Park. But nah, it took the cowards away. It really did. It was a cowardly team selection. It was a cowardly lineup. The tactics were absolutely deplorably negative. Playing 11 men behind the ball most of the time, letting them run around the pitch, without pressing them, without making any effort to get in their faces. Damage limitation tactics. And a game that we want to try and win to salvage something for the season. I honestly had enough of these guys. Selfishness and cowardice have characterised this entire season. People putting themselves before the greater good of the club, and that is what he did at the weekend. Absolutely deplorable.
I think as well, James, it's actually right to point that out. We've seen from the board right down to the playing staff and coaching staff that it seems to be running through the whole club, where it's like we think of ourselves before we actually think that, as you said, the greater good of the club. And from my point of view, John, I thought it would be a perfect opportunity, even though it's a game, a derby game, and do you know what I mean? How special that is. But James is right. These players, I'm fed up with them as well. And we've argued tooth and tongue, us guys as well, about the likes of Lee Griffiths, the likes of Yeti, and the likes of anybody really, Kenny and stuff, and Laxalt. But would you have went bolder and give the likes of... Now, I'm going to throw a name out here. We've talked about him maybe last week as well, but Carmoko Dembele wasn't even in the match day squad, which is just baffling to me. If you look at the options on the bench, we had Mickey Johnson back, which is great to see, but again, his body's like a skip; it just dissolves. So we don't know how long he's going to be back for. But what would you have done anything differently, John, in terms of that lineup?
Definitely.
Looking back now, obviously.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we said it before, and I was quite adamant before as well on the previous episode that we'd done that. I was confident that Lee Griffiths was going to get a start. I felt that it was time we just stopped starting Eddie because he's not been performing up to par this year. It was a chance for Griff to sort of prove that he warrants giving another chance, to put himself in the plans for Clark as well coming up for the international games and get yourself back in that picture as well. But what absolutely baffled me is, like you says, that Dembele wasn't even on the bench. Granted, Forrest is back, and starting Forrest seemed like the logical choice. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But no having a natural sort of wide player backing up that, just because ultimately we did end up taking Forrest off. And Kennedy, it baffles me as well, because pretty much all season, and especially since Kennedy's taken over, as James says, he's done nothing to sort of for the good of the club. I don't know what's going through his head, or what the hell Strachan and him discuss prior to games when they're going through team selections and everything else. But it's by and large, he's just sticking to the exact same formula that failed Neil Lennon. There's no fresh ideas. There's nothing new. And when you're 2 goals down in an Old Firm game, or a derby game, and you're looking at, ultimately you need to score goals, right? And what does Kennedy do? He takes Edward off.
Yeah.
He puts Mikey Johnson on, and you're left with 10 guys on the park, not one natural striker. And you think to yourself, you're just scratching your head, and you're like, as fans all season, we've seen it. We're asking questions, and we discuss this every week, about the changes that he needs to make in the team and the tactical side of things, and what you could do differently. And it's not just us, fans across the world, essentially. Anybody who's watching this team at the minute can see something needs to be done differently. And this is a guy who's been in the club all his life, and I don't know what it is or why, but these people in these positions getting paid phenomenal money can't see it, and they can't make these changes, and they can't do what we can all see and that we're all feeling. And it just absolutely baffles me that his name still is even considered and was being discussed for a permanent job, a permanent role. I just, he is part of the problem. He should have left with Lennon, along with Strachan. We shouldn't hold on to this sentimentality just because he's been at the club for some time. He's been a servant in a coaching role and all the rest of it. It's like we owe him something more, as Stephen has alluded to in previous episodes. Does he have something on this board that, you got to start asking? I mean, I know it might sound silly, but you need to really start asking questions like, what has he done to warrant it?
Yeah.
And even now, like he says, he's won nothing since he came in. He's done nothing exciting new. He's done nothing fresh. It's the same old story. And if you could argue even worse, and Anthony, you said in the group chat as well, even during the game when he made that substitution, he took Edward off. Excuse me. That if you're Lee Griffiths or you're a Yeti and you're sitting there and he's taking off your only striker. You've got no strikers on the park. You've got two sitting there on the bench. You're thinking, what am I even doing? Why bother? And I wouldn't blame them if they did just walk away, walk up the tunnel. That must be really disheartening for these guys as well. And it's any wonder that their heads have dropped, because this is the perfect time. There's nothing really to play for. It's a chance to bed in these new guys, like James says, guys that are going to be here next year. Give them a chance and to show their worth. And Kennedy again is just sticking with the same old format, the same old story. Like the sentimentality for Brown, he wouldn't have started for me ahead of Sorrow, but it's his last derby game before he leaves Celtic, so he has to play. Yeah. And Kent just ghosted by him like he wasn't even there for the majority of that game. And like you said, his legs are gone. And I love Brown. And don't get me wrong, I think he's been a great servant for the club, a fantastic captain, but you have to look at the bigger picture, and we've not done that at all this season, and it's been absolutely woeful.
Yeah, I think it brings it back to the point as well, for the good of the club, as James said, that it seems to be at the moment, Celtic's a club that owes everyone favours, whether it's old friends or old players. Come on in here, and here's a job for you for life. But speaking about what Kenny might have, now just to bring a wee bit of left field in here, I'm not being serious about this, but he might have pictures of the time they were all in the showers together and then he got the job. Could have been quite saucy, you never know. But I mean, for me, I'm looking at this, right? And I sent you guys the stuff we're going to talk about last night, just to be aware of it anyway. And for me, I'm going to come out and say this. I think the players, the staff, the board should be absolutely ashamed of what's happened this season. From start to finish, the derby games, the European campaign, both cup competitions, the league, it's been an absolute catastrophe. And I don't buy the whole narrative that Celtic fans are spoiled. We think we're entitled. It's not that. It's the bar the club have set, and they fell so far below this bar this season due to lack of competence, due to lack of communication. It seems like to me right now, as we stand at the moment, the board have just forgot about supporters altogether. I've seen across the city, not to always bring them up, but it's comparison anyway. Our closest club in terms of like size, capacity of stadiums and stuff, they've already sold 21,000 season tickets. They're buying into the methods for next season already, and we're still scraping around, not knowing what's going to happen next season. Many expected today, which is Tuesday, that something would be announced from the club, but again, it's silent. James, I'll come to yourself for this one. Are you in much of agreement with me, or do you think I'm being a wee bit too harsh there?
I don't think the words being too harsh are even applicable when it comes to the people at our club right now, because they say that success has a 1,000 fathers and failures an orphan. Well, this is failure on a colossal scale. And there are so many authors and there are so many people responsible for this failure that you can only start at the bottom and work your way up. So you start with the team. It's clear that there are a number of them who don't want to be there and who didn't want to be there. There are a number of them who, for whatever reason, couldn't get themselves motivated in this most historic of seasons. They colossally failed us here. Then you have the coaches who couldn't get some of these players fit until the season had only weeks left in it. And some of them still aren't fit. Then you have the manager, whose job it is to make sure the coaches are doing their job and to make sure the players are properly motivated and that the players who are in the first team are the guys who care and the guys who get it and the guys who are going to give 100%. And his job it is to pick the tactics and decide how the team lines up, and they failed. And above him is the board of directors, who are supposed to make sure that the manager's doing his job. And they screwed up because we all saw that Lennon wasn't getting the job done months ago. And they didn't act until February. And they still haven't replaced them yet. And then above the board is Dermot Desmond, the absentee landlord. And his is probably the worst failing because he's supposed to be this business genius and this tough guy and this hard man and doesn't like to lose. Well, he's lost this year colossally. And his response to all of it was to blame us for it, as if it's our fault. Collective failure from the bottom all the way up. Everybody failed this year. Everybody screwed up. And there's no such thing as being too harsh on these people. None of them should be in Celtic Park.
I mean, I can feel the passion coming off you there, James. From the top to the bottom, as I said, I think it's just been abysmal what we've seen this season. And the fact that we're coming in towards the end of the season, as you rightly alluded to there, we still have no word of a replacement. I mean, Roma replaced their manager in 3 hours today. 3 hours of business.
I saw that today, yeah.
They managed to replace their manager, and fair enough, it was with Jose Mourinho, a high-profile manager, but surely the God Celtic could come out and say something or give us something. Now, Anthony, you're the poet of the group. I always call you the poet of the podcast. I want you to put down your pen and your paper and stop writing for a minute. Tell me how you're feeling towards the club as a whole right now.
I'm feeling it's a mirror image compared to what James is feeling right now, and he's summed up all my anger and frustration perfectly. And I do believe that Desmond is one of the main architects of it, and of course his tag team partner, Mr. Lawwell. They always the last time Dermot Desmond came out and spoke, he spoke about. They know that when we were airing our frustrations about how long this management, this recruitment process is taken, and he used the term due diligence. I mean, there is, but when you actually think back throughout the entire term, whether or not the manager or not has been successful at Celtic, there has never actually been any with the exception of Brendan Rodgers, of course, who, as we know, was driven more by Dermot's ego being bruised on the back of a semi-final defeat against Rangers. We don't know if we'd won that semi-final, would Brendan have ever happened? We'll never know, but thankfully, I suppose it did. But you look back to anyone that's seen the history DVD of Celtic when it cuts to around the time of Martin leaving and Gordon Strachan coming in. Gordon Strachan confirms that he was basically hired on a drinking session at Cheltenham Festival. You then now thankfully Gordon Strachan had years of experience in managing in England's top flight and was able to be successful with less resources than Martin O'Neill. So that is, I accept that Gordon Strachan, I'll defend to the hilt with his accolades at Celtic. But then when the time came for Gordon to move on, and to be fair to him, he left at the right time. He maybe stayed a season too long, but I suppose having earned the third title in a row, he'd earned the right to stay. And then again, it all went Pete Tong the minute that the people at the top of the club needed to be bold and make the change from the position of strength. And we then ended up with our third or fourth choice that summer, Tony Mowbray, a guy who'd just been relegated from the English top flight, and ahead of guys. I mean, I think back then, sort of Davy Moyes was still at Everton. He was the sort of Brendan type appointment that would have been at that time. We weren't overly sort of hopeful that he would come, but that didn't happen. And then when that inevitably went tits up, as it were, so to speak, we hired Neil Lennon, a guy with no management experience whatsoever. Just to put it into perspective, John Kennedy is now more experienced to be Celtic manager than what Neil Lennon was in 2010. And then, of course, Neil left in 2014. Along came Ronnie, who did, to be fair to him, install a lot of the sort of athlete first and nutrition and fitness, all of those ideas that Brendan was really able to build on. But Ronnie Dyler was given the job because he was going to be coming in as the assistant, and then Neil resigned. So there was no due diligence to replace Neil Lennon, and we then got Brendan on the back of that, which as I said before, And I don't, and to coin a phrase from one of the other boys in the group, Ross, that the stars sort of aligned for us to get Rodgers. But even once he left, we got Neil back in. So and then we hired him in the shower on the back of a cup final victory. So the idea that these guys ever have any sort of level of, to coin their phrase, due diligence is laughable, and it gets frustrating the more you highlight this to people that still cling to the absolute myth that these guys are financial and business gods. The more you point out their flaws, the more they accuse you of being a spoiled brat or entitled, and it's insane. It is insane for people to still cling to the fact, for me, that these guys basically are fit to run this club. Is Dominic Mackay? Forget about the rebuilding on the park. The rebuild off the park that Dominic Mackay is essentially going to be charged with a lot of, you could argue, is even bigger than what is needed on the park.
Yeah, but what's scary for me as well, Anthony, you bring up some great points. Now, I'm going to speak about Peter Lawwell just for a second. I know he's not everyone's favourite person. When he first came into Celtic, I think on his contract it said he's going to be in charge of non-football that matters. I think everyone saw that and seen that. But over the years, he's got this kind of thing about him where he thinks he's a presence, and he's became a de facto director of football. And as James actually pointed out, he's one of the reasons why, basically the main reason why Rodgers was ousted out of Celtic, signing players and stuff about his say-so. And Rodgers, obviously, as a high-profile manager, as he was before, and then he left, he won't stick for that. But coming to yourself, John, I've been hearing from certain individuals and certain outlets that there is murmurings that Peter Lawwell is going to be staying on at Celtic in terms of being on the, I don't know the exact role, but I think it's the board in somehow, or like a non-director capacity. Is that a bad thing? Because for me, that shouldn't be happening. If Dominic Mackay's coming in as fresh, he doesn't need anyone else devoiding his ideas.
I mean, there's definitely some weight in that, because Lawwell, as I understand, is he has a large portion of shares at Celtic. So I believe that gives him the right to be present for these kind of board meetings and things like that. So whether or not he opts to sell those shares, or he decides that he's going to keep hold of them and still have a say on matters going forward, remains to be seen. But it's possible. It's entirely possible. But just touching on, again, very sort of passionate and fantastic points both of you guys, James and Anthony, brought up regarding these guys at the top level at Celtic Park. Dominic Mackay needs to ensure when he comes in here that he's no letting the board walk out of the tap of him, in essence, right? He needs to, I'm hoping and I'm praying that this appointment is done because his ability to do the job as a chief executive officer, which we know Lawwell was originally brought in for because he had this sort of financial acumen. He was a good businessman in that sense, and by and large, if we're being honest, what he's done for Celtic in terms of their finances, he's done a great job. But it's his meddling and sticking his fingers in and sticking his neb in where it comes to player signings and everything else, taking up this de facto director of football role without any real sort of consent, and not getting any info or any sort of acknowledgement or running it by managers and things like that, is exactly why we lost to like Sir Rodgers, and why potentially when these stories come out, and the managers, they'll speak to each other as well. So anybody, I suspect that we've been approaching or even had words with, I've been speaking to people within football, and they'll be told these things. I think Lawwell leaving is a good sign, absolutely, because it's time for him to go. I'm hoping Mackay comes in and he does a job as a chief executive officer, non-football related matters, stick to the business end of things, and deal with it that way. Let the manager or whoever he brings in as a director of football, whoever his right hand is, and whoever he's going to be working with day to day, let them make those decisions and let them take the club forward. Desmond needs to stay out it. Then what their role at this point is solely ensuring that the right man for the job is brought in, which I firmly believe is going to be Eddie. I don't think it's a matter of if, it's just a matter of when at this point. There's far too much going on. There's far too much talk about it. for it to just be hearsay in a rumour. So it looks like that appointment is going to happen. It's just a matter of when. We need to get it done, get it out of the line as quickly as possible. As you say, we were hoping to hear something today, but again, I don't know why we get hopes up when it comes to the Celtic board and making announcements, because, as you say, we're approaching 69, 70 days now since Lennon left, and we've not heard a peep from him, or we've not been given absolutely anything, and we touched on it repeatedly, and that in itself is an absolute shambles. And ultimately, these guys are coming up to the point where now they're going to need to be issuing season ticket renewals. And if they're expecting Celtic fans after the season we've just had, their silence, their complete disregard for the support base and as a whole, really, and they just lack, like, they're so far away for the actual supporters of the club. There's something needs to change, and that includes even at board level. And as I said, it's paramount, and made a fantastic point. It's paramount that the guys, the Dominic Mackay coming in, the rebuild for that level is just as important going forward as the actual team itself, because we need to make sure that these guys are doing their job as they were actually brought in to do, and not pretending to be something they're not. And just let the guys that actually know football and know their job, know their roles to do what they need to do, and just it's just an absolute mess at the minute, and we can only speculate. We don't know. We still don't know what the hell is going to happen with the whole managerial thing. Whether, like I said, it's a matter of if, a matter of when, not if for me. But it's like, how long are you going to drag it out before you actually give the Celtic fans something? I don't know when the season ticket renewals actually go out, but I suspect that they'll probably do something just prior to that, just to pull them all in again, which in itself is shocking, because they're dragging it out the way they are, and the silence coming for the board has been absolutely deafening.
Yeah, and see as well, to be honest, I just want to make something clear on the podcast as well. We're not aiming to be like too political in terms of what's going on in the Celtic background, but I think Anthony rightly pointed out, and James as well, that there's a rebuild in them departments too, because we've lost the head of recruitment. We're still looking for a director of football. Nothing's been solved in that area. So for the rebuild to be successful on the field, you needed the bricks in place behind the team as well, so the manager can fall back on that and look for players, and vice versa. So it needs to be all working on the hymn sheet. So I don't want listeners to get lost in what we're talking about. We're just clearly pointing out face value what we can see as fans. But just to move on, James, come to yourself. John brought up Eddie Howe there, and yes, listeners and viewers and stuff, we're going to go there again. So the longer this goes on for me, James, this rebuild, as Anthony said last week, it's mammoth. It's a huge task, and day by day, you're going to yourself, why can we not hear something from the board? And can you not just be Eddie Howe? Could Eddie Howe not say, look, announce me and we'll sort out the rest soon? I just don't know what's going on here, and we're just clinging to this hope that Eddie Howe's in the background being like Superman, pressing buttons. I need this guy, I need this guy, I need this guy. But where are you standing on the whole situation, James?
Oh, well, I mean, obviously, if we get Eddie Howe, then at least some of this waiting has been worth it. At least some of it has. But there's a real danger now. Well, there's two dangers here. I mean, there's the obvious one and there's the less obvious one. The obvious one is the time it's taken is seriously curtailing our chances of having any kind of squad up and running for the start of next season. And in particular, the qualifiers for European football. And we need to be ready for those. I don't think we're going to go through the Champions League qualifiers. The road is too difficult when you're not in the Champions group. It's hard enough for us when we're in the Champions group, but it's extremely difficult when you're not. The chances are that we're going to get a top 5 leagues club at some point, and that's curtains, I think, at this point. But the danger is that we're not even going to be ready for a tough Europa League qualifier as well. And that really scares the hell out of me, that we drop out the Champions League into the Europa League and we're not even ready for that level. And if we go out of Europe before a ball is even properly kicked in the league, we are in a lot of trouble. Whoever the top earner is at the club at that point will probably get sold before the window shuts. And that'll be Cal McGregor. Bye-bye. And we'll have no time to replace the guy. I can just see the disaster of next season starting to unfold already, the longer this takes. And of course, the less obvious worry is it because we haven't got Eddie Howe's name on a piece of paper yet. There's always a chance that something happens that's completely unforeseen that makes it impossible for Eddie Howe to take the job. You know, whether it's Eddie Howe changes his mind, whether it's his family changes their minds, whether it's something in his personal life or private life that goes wrong, there's some reason why he can't leave England. It's always going to be there until we have his name on a piece of paper and an announcement made. And I just cannot understand why we would take such a momentous risk. Because if Eddie Howe says no, I don't know where we're going. If I was in Roy Keane's shoes and we approached him after Eddie Howe had said no, I would tell us to get fucked. I would tell us to ram it, and I would leave us scrambling, because that's what we would be. And then you're looking at that point, you're looking at a Jack Ross style appointment, unless Neil Lennon doesn't have a job by then.
I think as well. I mean, we talk about this in the podcast all the time, and when it comes to Eddie Howe, I'm quite decisive within the group. I don't believe at this present moment. I mean, it's just my personal point of view. I just long it takes, and it's all drawn out. And you look at Roma hiring Jose Mourinho within 3 hours, Anthony. Me personally, I don't believe Eddie Howe will be the manager, which leads me to believe that we're going down the road of scrimping around because Eddie Howe said no, or he's looking at a Premier League job. And as James rightly alluded to there, where do we turn to? Roy Keane, he's not my choice, but if Celtic ask him, he has the right to say no, because again, who wants to be a second, third, fourth, fifth choice going into a club knowing that's where you're starting, knowing that's your starting point? And Anthony, we talk about it all the time, this mammoth rebuild. And to be fair, James brought up a point there. We may not even be ready for Europa League level, never mind SPFL level as well. So we have to challenge on all fronts. We have to be ready and kicking to go. And at the moment, I can just see that there's just no progression plan, and that's been the main problem this year anyway from the board.
Yeah, and but going back to what we've said before, that this is a recurring theme where the people that currently run our club are concerned. They constantly refuse to, or they either refuse to, or they don't have the vision to build on a position of strength. And if you're a guy in the dugout with any level of talent or ambition, you can understand why they don't stick around too long. As I say, the way that Brendan left a very, very sour taste. Don't get me wrong, but when hindsight comes in, it is a wonderful thing. And the more you connect the dots, the more you look at the little points where the entire sort of relationship broke down. You could see that it was inevitable, and you actually can't blame him for looking at a club like Leicester City and saying, "Yeah, you know what? I'll fancy that," because for all there's a lot of basket cases down in England. I don't actually regard Leicester City as one of them. You can totally understand why he would leave, but like you're saying, looking ahead. Yeah, I mean, I think I agree, and I've said that in the group chat, and I've said it to anyone that cares to listen that follows Celtic same as me. I think the Champions League is so much. It's so much of a. It's more. It's Celtic being in the Champions League is more of a pipe dream for me than the European Super League at this minute in time. I can't see it. Not with the level of opponent we would be up against in that side of the draw. As James says, I mean, we've only been in the Champions League, was it twice in the last 6 seasons? So that's from having a far superior squad than what we have now, having a far better manager, and just being on the sort of, if you want inverted commas, easier side of the draw. But would any of you guys fancy a night over in Sedova or anywhere like that? And with this mob, I certainly wouldn't. There's a lack of trust between the supporters and the team now. You can't trust them to turn up for anything. The fact that we were sort of really trying to sugarcoat a victory over, Falkirk or whoever it was, was it Livingston with the 6-0 win over, and we were, it just shows you how far standards have dropped. And and I don't see them sort of raising again until, at the very least, we get a guy announced. And I hope that's Eddie Howe. I think, like John, I think it will be Eddie Howe. I'm pretty certain it will be Eddie Howe. But I will hear you as well, Stephen. Until that's signed, sealed, and delivered, then anything's possible.
Yeah. As well, I get, you yourself, guys. I mean, especially in the group chat, I'm always called things like negativity and stuff, but I think I'm coming from a realism point of view. John, Eddie Howe, yes, he's the person everyone wants. No, because I'm coming to you next, because you're the next person on my list. I'm taking people off once we go here. So you're a big fan of Eddie Howe. You've made that clear, and you're confident, like the other guys are, and James as well. He wants Eddie Howe, and we all do.
Yeah.
But surely to God, after what we've seen again on the weekend, factor in the cup game, he's won 3 games in 8, one against the League One team. There has to be something coming out of this club this week. We said countless times, we said every time we're on, but come on here. I don't understand why the board are reluctant to say anything, just anything at all at the moment.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. And it like, as I said, it's baffling that they've not come out and said something, or not even gave us just even a wee snippet of something, just anything really, just to sort of like put some minds at ease. Like, see, even if Eddie's signed and that information is not came to light yet, if that is the case, just come out and say it, and then tell us he's not coming in until this point because whatever the reason might be. Like I said, there's a variety of reasons why he maybe not be announced yet. You hear things and you can only speculate, right? We don't know, but I mean. And this is the thing, when you've got so little coming for the actual club itself, all you can do is just sort of guess. It's all guesswork, right? And that in itself just creates problems, because then, like we've done on this podcast, and like many fans are on various different forums, it's constantly you're asking questions like, who's it going to be? Is it going to be this guy? Everybody that comes out of a job, or even people that are still in a job, are getting linked. And the level of what?
What did you say there? I thought I heard you wrong. Sorry.
Well, everybody that's unemployed at the minute in a managerial role is getting linked with a job.
Oh, right. Okay.
I don't know what you're hearing, but and ultimately it there's just a sort of airy discontent at the minute, and there needs to be something done as soon as possible, like he says, because time's running out, and the longer this drags out, the less time we've got ultimately to get things moving forward and get ourselves prepared. Unlike James, and I don't know whether or not Anthony maybe agree with me, but when it comes to Europe, I'm not expecting anything this coming season, and if we get anywhere in any sort of European competition, if we make the Europa League group stages, I'd be absolutely delighted, but I'm expecting nothing for Europe this year. And this year, my primary focus and all I care about is getting this league title back and making sure we qualify for the Champions League proper next year. That by and large is the primary goal, and I don't care about anything else.
I would agree with you on that, John. I mean, there's the old saying that the league is our bread and butter, but Europe's just your wee slice of Wolves Viennetta. But yeah, I'm not expecting much myself. I do agree with you, especially the Champions League. I can't see it happening. But I think, just as James alluded to, in terms of how financially catastrophic failure to qualify for anything, any of the European competitions would be.
I think,
but yeah, like you say, in terms of what we would regard as success next season, I said that last week, that it's got to be, we need to get that title back. There's an argument to be made that next season is actually potentially even, maybe not in terms of the historical significance of it, but in terms of getting that title back and, like you say, getting right back into Europe. Next season is every bit, if not more important than what the 10 was this year.
Yeah, and just to touch on what you said there as well, it's Europe for us is the best way we can really make money, because we've not got the same sort of level of income as any of the other top leagues in Europe. and I think we're well aware of where we stand in that respect. So, club like Celtic, and that we do look to Europe, obviously, for a bigger source of sort of additional income in that respect. But I think next season we've got enough. I think we're financially sound at this point. We've got enough to be able to go the year without it, as long as you're winning the league next year, and that being primary, and that being the number one obviously outcome. Then qualifying for the Champions League proper the following year. The windfall for that in itself would more than make up for me anyway, no making any sort of European competition this year.
Yeah.
Another thing, just to sort of touch on regarding Howe's appointment, if he does come in, obviously we don't. Again, it's all sort of hearsay, but you can only sort of guess at the reasons why it's not coming out. We can say as much as we like as we want on these sort of podcasts and posting online about the reasons for it, but ultimately we don't know, and there may well be a reason. If there's not a reason, then it just further shows the how far the border for the fans and that sort of disconnect, and they clearly don't care. But if there is a reason, I hope that comes to light when the managerial appointment's made. I hope there's a full statement, because the fans deserve that, explaining why it's taken so long. And I'm hoping as well, because I know how Celtic fans can be, but we're very critical, and I'm hoping that Celtic fans don't jump on Eddie's back straight away if he doesn't make any sort of impact in Europe right after the bat, because the size of the rebuild he's coming into is phenomenal, and as long as he stables the ship and we perform in the league, that's what he should be judged on in his first season.
Yeah, I mean, I've almost got visions, James, of Eddie Howe's first picture if he gets announced as Celtic manager, of him, and just in the background is like 11 new players. Eddie Howe plus 11. I mean, that would be the best case scenario. Like, he's outside now working on who he's bringing in. He's doing the old Harry Redknapp, bringing the likes of Cranshaw and all them types of players to follow suit, like the way when Harry Redknapp went to different clubs, they all followed him. But coming to yourself, James, here, we talk about the rebuild, and we've touched upon this in the podcast before. In terms of homegrown talent within the SPL, the top league itself, is there anyone within the top league that you think would suit Celtic next season? What comes to mind for me is the likes of Josh Dodge at Hibs, Alan Campbell at Motherwell, and Lewis Ferguson as well. As much as he's obviously related to the Fergusons who played for Rangers, I don't really care about that. He's a good player. But is there any homegrown talent that you would have at Celtic?
Yeah, you've just listed 2 out of 3. I would take Lewis Ferguson in 2 seconds. Alan Campbell's top of the list. Alan Campbell's number 1 with a bullet, because you can build the midfield around him in Turnbull. And I know people are going to say, Motherwell players. You know what? It doesn't matter where they start, it's where they end. Right? You know, there's a point where David Turnbull is no longer David Turnbull ex-Motherwell. David Turnbull is now David Turnbull of Celtic. And that's the kind of mentality that you need to have about these guys. Now, I mean, there's people like Greg Taylor who you look at and you don't really see any improvement. And fair enough. You know, we took a shot on Greg Taylor. Some people call it a cheap option, but we took a shot on a young, promising, upcoming Scottish player, and it has not worked out so far. But then I don't think you can judge Greg Taylor yet, because he's played in a team that was a complete mess, a team that was falling apart. See, I mean, I said this in the last podcast about Shane Duffy. We've watched Shane Duffy playing in the Premiership and cruising through games. And I cannot believe that the Shane Duffy of the English Premiership is the same Shane Duffy who's played up here in the SPL. So it's hard to judge somebody like Greg Taylor when you've watched a regression in a player like that. But Alan Campbell at Motherwell is an absolute must. He's number 1. Lewis Ferguson, the argument in favour of signing Lewis Ferguson gets stronger the more that guy plays, the more you watch that guy play. He's an absolute class act. There's no question that he would enhance the Celtic squad and eventually the Celtic team. And then there's Ryan Porteous at Hibs, who'd be my third choice, and I would go and I would grab him before some English club takes him away and we're watching him in the Champions League in a few years' time, because I think he's a great player. And I'm sorry that there's nobody at right back or left back who I would take right now, because it would be nice if we could go at least and find a squad player in those positions. I don't see anybody on the wing. I thought there was only one striker who was worth looking at before he left Aberdeen. Would have been Cosgrove, who would have done a job in the Celtic forward line that no other player could have done or has done for a long time, and he would have provided us with a big battering ram type guy, and we need one of those. But he, alas, is no longer there. But I like Nisbet at Hibs. I think he looks like, I think he's levelled up really well, and I think that in a couple of years' time he's going to be one to watch, but not right now.
Yeah, I think Ryan Porteous is a great shout. I think if he sorts out his aggressive side of things in the game, he'll be a fantastic defender. I've always liked him playing for Hibs, and Alfie, I don't know about yourself. We look at the rebuild all the time here. We have touched upon homegrown talent before in terms of our previous podcast, but I think it's important to talk about players that could eventually end up at Celtic. And as James rightly said, there are likes of Alan Campbell. People will be laughing, saying, "Oh, he played for Motherwell, blah blah blah." But you have to look at this. Aston Villa is saying John McGinn from Hibs, and I look at him. No one's laughing now. But what's your opinion on the homegrown talent side of things? Do you think that's where Celtic need to focus on this rebuild?
They certainly have to focus a significant part of it, yeah, just in purely in terms of the finance that is involved in what this rebuild is going to cost as well. Anyone who turns their nose up at Alan Campbell because of the club he plays for clearly know nothing about football. And anyone that needs a history lesson on some of the players we've purchased from Motherwell over the years, Ryan McClare, Phil O'Donnell, it's not a bad little well to go to, so to speak, for players. I think Alan Campbell's a terrific young player. I remember the year that we won the double treble in 2018. He was marked up as one of the players to watch in the final at that point. That just shows you how highly regarded he was. The tenacious Alan Campbell, they call him, and that's what we're crying out for. Perhaps he's maybe the long-term successor to Scott Brown. You just
Absolutely.
Never know. In terms of, maybe not necessarily saying homegrown in terms of, youth. I'm just trying to, you guys have sort of named it the main ones. I'm thinking purely if we're going to be so short up front next season. Is there maybe a place for a guy like Shankland? I don't know. He's maybe not quite hit the heights as what he did last season. I'm really struggling to elaborate any more on the ones that you guys touched on. Perhaps as well, looking at Hibs again, it would have been more of a Johnny Hayes type signing. There was a lot of people talking last season about perhaps getting Boyle in from Hibs, and I think it would have necessarily just essentially been a right-sided version of Johnny Hayes. But that sort of the classic term, he could do a job for us. Maybe Saturday home games at 3:00 against Kilmarnock, something like that. You could fit him in there. But in terms of that, I think the main ones are the guys that you have already mentioned, and I would have them. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Porteous as well, I must admit. Yeah,
I mean, as well, you have to look at it. I think we have to take advantage going forward of the compensation fee, that the one that where you pay down, like then you get the young player like we've done with Moussa Dembele from Fulham. Is Liam Shaw signed? It's been confirmed, hasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah,
Well, I tell you what, I don't actually think it was Celtic that announced it though. I think it was Sheffield United that did. So there we go. We know Sheffield United have posted more about Celtic this season than what Celtic have.
And then there was a speculation around a young striker called Kyle Joseph from Wigan. I think that's kind of went dead. I think he's aiming for a move to stay down there. But come to yourself, John. So you look at the likes of Josh Doidge, Alan Campbell, Kevin Nesbitt, Ryan Porteous, and if you're going down a wee bit, you look at Jamie Hamilton, the place for Hamilton, funny enough, and he's a good young up-and-coming defender as well. But going forward for the rebuild anyway, for me, as Anthony said, the finance side of things, especially, it's vital that we have the scouting network in place, especially UK, Ireland, Scotland, so we can take advantage of any players that are up and coming, or even a player in the team that's doing well and could do a job at Celtic, surely.
No, absolutely, and it's even more important now than it's ever been because of the whole the Brexit thing and the basically the criteria that players need to meet now outside of the UK in order to even play in the country. So it's extremely important that the scouting network is well versed in top sort of players, up and coming as well, young guys throughout the UK as a whole, Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales. We need to be looking at these primarily, I think, going forward, because there is a lot of talent here. And there's a lot of great young players that are coming through as well that can develop well under the right guy as well. So I think that the pool that we have within the UK should definitely be looked at and watched with great interest and with great importance. But absolutely, whoever we bring in, regardless, is going to need to know their stuff, and they need to be doing their due diligence on any player before they bring them in. Which sort of baffles me at the minute, because as it stands, we don't have a guy in the door, at least we're led to believe, but we're still signing guys. So where's this coming from? Who's making these decisions? What is it that's actually happening? And what do we need to do in order to ensure that whoever it is that is coming in are these guys that the incoming manager wants, or is this the board at their best, Lol getting these last couple of bits in before he leaves? But just going back to it, there's a lot of great talent within Scottish football itself. There's a lot of great young talent throughout England as well. We heard the story for, and it still amazes me, but that interview we did with David Webb and how he found Wilfried Zaha playing non-league, Sunday league stuff as a young guy, looking right through grassroots and finding these sort of players and just giving them a chance. So I think that whoever we bring in needs to focus heavily on the youth side, because we've got great players within our youth setup as well that we could develop and turn into great players. So I think we need that's where we're going to need to focus primarily going forward as the sort of UK market.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right there as well. And just before we move on to the famous quiz between Anthony and James, I want to bring up a point that is seen today that it's kind of been left to the side, but it's been out there in the news anyway, especially Celtic pages. Andy Walker's been banned from Celtic Park. He's a commentator for Sky Sports, a former Celtic player. He was in the centenary and all that kind of thing. And I don't know. I think it's mainly because of what he was saying about Dubai, and it goes back years, so I'm not going to pretend to know a lot about it, but I found it a bit like, what's going on here? But James, coming to yourself, in terms of the ex-players, like of Andy Walker, Charlie Nicholas, me personally, I don't agree.
Charlie Nicholas needs a ban.
Yeah, no, but for me, I don't agree with most things that they say and stuff, but isn't that like the case of, I mean, this is going to sound like a terrible thing to say, but like in terms of lemons, but freedom of speech, so they can say what they want?
Well, I'll tell you that I'm all for freedom of speech, right? I mean, my God, it's the newspaper's ability to write whatever nonsense they want that covers my back when I write whatever nonsense I want. So I'm quite happy for freedom of speech. But it's all very well for a guy to insult you in the street, but a completely different thing for a guy who you've invited into your living room to insult you. And there are some journalists and some publications, for that matter, who shouldn't be within miles of Celtic Park, because all they ever do is find excuses to criticise, or they make stuff up. I mean, there's an example just from this week. I mean, John Kennedy's famous director of football story, which is absolute nonsense, right? Kennedy said the next day that it was made up, right? You cannot get a more clinical termination of a story than that, right? And yet the Daily Record resurrected the same story the very next day. I mean, it's incredible, right? You've got a guy like Michael Gannon today who's telling Callum McGregor, for your own good, leave Celtic Park. These are the guys who are supposed to be promoting Scottish football, and he's trying to sell one of the best players in Scottish football to some team in England, right? And this is what these guys do. We're in a war with some of these guys. These guys are the enemy, right? They're on the other side. And to have these people sitting in our house, that just shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. Andy Walker is one of the stupidest people earning a living in the British media, right? I don't like the guy. I don't like lots of stuff that comes out of his mouth. But the idea that we are letting people like Michael Gannon sit in Celtic Park when Andy Walker gets banned is laughable, right? It's laughable. This is a guy he's not paid for doing the news, right? Andy Walker doesn't break stories, and so Andy Walker doesn't invent stories either. He doesn't lie about the club. He's critical, and sometimes he's too critical, and sometimes he's critical just for the sake of opening his mouth and saying something negative, right? But you can't ban someone for that. There's people who accuse me of doing the exact same thing when I sit down every morning to start work. Andy Walker wasn't banned because he told lies about Celtic or stirred up trouble at Celtic. He was banned because he criticised the decision-making of our board of directors, and that's not a valid reason for banning someone. That's exactly what they've done. That's exactly what they do. This is what's happened this week with Andy Walker being banned from Ibrox. It's typical of the Ibrox bully boy attitude. When they're on top, they've got to make sure that not only are they on top, but that everybody feels what it's like to be under their boot, and that's all they do. It's shameful for the club to be acting in the same way. And I'll tell you something else. I don't think we would have banned Andy Walker until they did. And we're hiding behind what they've done because we feel, I think, if we are on the same side as them on this, the Sky can't take action against either club for fear of having to take action against both clubs. And I think it's cowardly as well. It's a ridiculous decision. It's completely unjustified.
Yeah, I mean, I can hear it in your voice where you're coming from there, and I think what you're saying there in terms of Celtic kind of following suit behind Rangers, it does points to this season, even in a whole as well. Just the whole stance, the whole way we've been getting on in terms of the board, and they're still. I mean, they're, as you said, like if Michael Gannon come out and telling players to leave, and you're going to yourself, what's going on here? But Alfie, coming to yourself in terms of Andy Walker, I know he's not everyone's favourite guy, but are you on what the kind of wavelength James is there?
Absolutely, I would second every word of it. I actually just quickly seen James's article on it just before we started recording. You know, Andy Walker is he's not going to be graduating from Harvard anytime soon, and you know he's not he's by no means either what I would class as anywhere near even decent at punditry either. He's certainly no Michael Stewart or any of those guys of that level, but he is banned for basically criticising the people that run Celtic and he's doing it with validity. He's making valid points with regards to that, and as James alludes to, the fact that we allow other journalists in inverted commas and other media outlets in to Celtic Park and ban Andy Walker, I think is a disgrace. And even just to finish it on it as well, it's even the optics of it look ridiculous as well, because it's been announced the day after Rangers have decided to do it for him making a perfectly valid point that they're in a perilous financial state. That's not lies. That is the truth. And it just seems that this sort of Trump kind of post-truth era of, you know, shutting people down and closing people out that are prepared to stand up and tell the truth, no matter how much you might disagree with them a lot of the time, but people that tell the truth should be backed, not bullied by people who supposedly should know better. But as we've alluded to far too often, and especially this season, for whatever reason, we seem very, very eager to sort of resurrect the old firm ink. The both Glasgow clubs, to get together as one on certain fronts. There was very little left that I thought could surprise me or shock me about Celtic this season and the people that run our club. But I couldn't believe it when I seen that that they'd followed suit with their friends across the Clyde and banned Andy Walker. It's ridiculous. And as much as it is for me to defend Sky Sports and anything run by Rupert Murdoch, I hope Sky Sports throw the book at us. I really do. If there's any legal avenue they can go down, I would support it. As a Celtic season ticket holder, I would support it.
Yeah, I mean that's the really crazy thing about this, right? Of all the arguments that we could get into with the media, right? This is the hill we've chosen. This is the ditch we've chosen to die in. This one here with Sky Sports, because at the end of the day, we're not going to win this. There's no There is no upside to us doing this. We're not going to win this. If Sky Sports decide that they're going to penalise the whole of Scottish football for the stance the two clubs have taken, the two clubs are going to have to back down. It's mental. It makes no sense for us to be getting involved in this. It's another example of just following Ibrox into a fight that does us no good and which we will not win. It's mad.
Yeah. And John, what about yourself? Where are you stand on the Andy Walker argument?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with these guys. I mean, the guy, whether you like him or no, he's entitled to say what he wants. These media personalities they're paid to talk, right? And that's all they're doing. And the stuff Andy Walker says, it's not like it was made up. It's not like it's a lie. We're all well aware. It's fact. It's true. If the Celtic board don't like it, then and they're banning him because of it, then they need to. The Celtic fan base at large feel like that. We know that the whole Dubai thing was a shambles, and the way it was orchestrated and everything else was a mess, right? And again, it comes to these things. It's like, is Celtic doing this just because Rangers have done it, or is there anything else to it? Because to think that they're banning a media personality just because of an opinion, which he's more than entitled to, is absolutely ridiculous. And all these media sort of outlets that do the same, that report, that's what they're doing. They're doing what these guys are paid to do, right? Whether it's made up, whether it's a load of shite, or whether there's fact in it, that's their job. And that's what they're essentially they're discussing. I don't like Andy Walker. I don't like a lot of the stuff he comes out with. I made a snide comment about Charlie Nicholas should get a ban, but I don't believe that either. That was just tongue in cheek. But again, he's another guy who just talks absolute shite, and some of the stuff he comes out with is baseless. And he's just talking. And Commons is another one. And
his comments on Brunity are absolutely disgusting.
But I mean,
disgusting.
But you're right, and but ultimately, as a club, we need to be the bigger man, right? We need to just realise that this is all part and parcel of the game. You make decisions, people are going to talk about it, and if that's the case, then you need to stick by that. And if you're going to stick by that, then you need to ban everybody who's had anything negative to say about the club. It's just an absolute mess, and they've dug themselves a hole now, and it'd be interesting to see how they're going to get out of it.
Yeah. I mean, as well, I think that's perfectly summed up from all three of you guys in terms of the Andy Walker thing, and the Charlie Nicholas thing about Brown, as James was going to say, is ludicrous, and we could spend all night talking about that. I think picking that apart, there's no point, because we all know Scott Brown's an icon, a legend, led us through the 9 in a row, the quadruple winning captain. There's so many things you can say about the guy, but in terms of the main show, that's us done, guys. So deep breaths again. We're going to move on to the quiz, and it's going to be between Anthony and James this week.
Perfect.
If you guys are ready, let me know.
Yeah,
ready when you are, mate.
So basically, James, it's 5 questions, and the first of 3. I'm not too technical. Whoever wins wins. So the first question is, which was Gordon Strachan's first trophy as Celtic manager?
The League Cup, the CIS Insurance Cup. If it was the League Cup, yeah.
1-0 to Anthony. And it was 3-0. It was 3-0 that day that we beat Dunfermline. Who scored the goals?
Sean Maloney, Dion Dublin, Marcin Zarowski.
Jeez.
Well done.
2-0.
I barely can't even process the question.
And if you get this, Anthony, you win, so you can go for a hat-trick here. There was something different about the Celtic shorts that day. What was it?
They all had Jimmy Johnston's number on it. So they all had the number 7 on it.
Oh, wow.
Fair play, mate.
Anthony he must have found the page where I get my quiz questions.
Okay, well, I'll actually just before we get just so James knows and so all the other listeners know, the regular contributors to the show do not get the questions in advance. I absolutely guarantee that because I think it's all fair. I promise.
Yeah, it is. I mean, James as well. Thanks for coming on again. Have you enjoyed this one?
No problem, mate. It was a pleasure.
No worries. I'll probably have you on again in the future to talk all things Celtic when it's a bit more positive. And to my co-host John, thank you, and a regular show contributor Anthony. Have you enjoyed it?
Thanks, guys. Yeah, but I mean, as much as it's not been the most enjoyable subjects to try and get through, and trying to sort of narrate how you're feeling at the moment. But yeah, it's always great coming on, talking to you guys, and especially as well, thanks again to James for coming on and giving up his time.
No problem.
Brilliant. And also to make the listeners aware, we'll have another football guest coming on within the next couple of weeks, Lewis Toshney. He's well known around Scottish football circles. He played for Celtic and he's played for likes of Ross County and Kilmarnock. So it's going to be a good insight into his career, something to look forward to. And until Friday, our regular podcast, stay well and keep safe. Hail, hail.